Dr. Abdul, let me ask you this.
How do we make sure that we did?
What you're saying appears to be a case of the chicken and the egg, which came first. There will be those who will argue that if you collected money for your vote, the person who you ended up voting for, if it's on the basis of that gratification, what you refer to as instant gratification, and particularly those who are more vulnerable in society, they have no right to ask questions about what that person then does with the power they've invested him with, especially if he had paid for it or she had paid for it at the onset. And that what they then do is that they wait. When it is time for the other part of the electoral process to take place, they then expect that gratification again, and he or she is willing, has spent the intervening period gathering the resources to again settle across board for another term in office. So why I raise the issue of the chicken and the egg is, which one is first? Is it stopping it at the point of the purchase at the beginning of the process, or is it preventing people with such motivations from even having access to the voters at the point of the electoral process?
Okay, I don't actually think it's a classic case of chicken and the egg. But yes, I agree with you. Sometimes when we compromise our process, we also compromise our capacity to engage. There is no doubt about it. But the fact that somebody paid, and this payment thing, is that it does not necessarily vitiate people's rights. Their rights are actually enshrined in the Constitution for you to actually engage. That is very clear. And people who are very conscious of their right, it doesn't vitiate it. The second dimension is that the person giving is not a trade. Somebody just got in there and decided to pay. And this is unacceptable, like I mentioned earlier. It's unacceptable. If there are better ways, there are mechanisms that we can actually do to discourage this. It's important that we do it. But for me, from where I sit, from what I understand, is that these people who are even complaining about it are actually doing it the more. I have friends who are running for elections, and I know how much people are spending. And anybody who has a friend running for election that you know, people asking for contribution left, right, and center, and then you begin to ask yourself questions. My friend, did I ask you to run for these elections? Or why can't you run this election without necessarily investing this mass of resources on people actually getting to it? So it's a big, big issue as a country. Look, this is not the first time we're having this conversation. If you remember in 2014, 2015, there was a whole conversation around stomach infrastructure, which is another dimension of this. And if you also remember, there are also all conversations around elections expenditure. And we even have a law around it. Have we ever seen anybody coming out, even INEC? They kept saying they don't have the capacity to actually determine, to be able to measure how much politicians are spending, talk much of even taking the required action around it. What we are saying is that, look, you don't just speak to the gallery. If there are structural issues, you deal with the structural issues, because even if you make a law against it, you are not able to fundamentally address it. Look, everybody knows that to pay somebody, to induce somebody in the polling station is criminal, because you are undermining the sanctity of the electoral process. It's very criminal. So you don't need a special law to deal with that. You can deal with it. Anybody who's doing that. And INEC has made it very clear that you can't do that at the polling unit. But what is actually happening is that, look, the nature, inducement has always been part of our electoral process, as bad as it is. It has always been part of our electoral process. It didn't start in this Third Republic. It has in the Fourth Republic. It has always been there. But the dimension, the character, the way of presentations have changed fundamentally. And the dimension of presentation is responding to the character of our politics and economy and the technology available. In those days, people moved from house to house to provide this kind of inducement. And the inducement may not be cash. But as the economy becomes more consumerist in character and cash becomes a major issue, cash begins to creep in. Look, as technology begins to advance, people are finding other mechanisms of making the payment. But what we are not also dealing with, what we are seeing, are the ones that the poor are actually collecting. We are not even looking at the one that is being collected by the vote brokers. We have brokers in our communities who actually collect the chunk. They are the big people. They are sitting there. They are the brokers. Some of them may not even vote. But they collect chunks and they take huge amount of money, which they probably share. And in fact, the one that is being shared even in our polling station may probably not even be coming from the candidate directly, It may be coming from the brokers. What do we do with the brokers that we are not seeing?
Dr. Abdul, indeed, there are these other aspects that we have to discuss. And maybe another time we'll bring you back on this subject to come and expatiate. But for now, we do have to say thank you very much for joining us on Sunrise Daily this morning. Dr. Hussaini Abdul is the Country Director of Plan International.